So my name is Oleh Stupak, and I am Director of Studies in Economics in Corpus College, Cambridge. I have joined this year after a PhD in Economic Cybersecurity at the University of Oxford. And today I will give you a talk about multiple phases of economics, whatever it means. We'll discuss it more in detail very soon. But first, outline of our talk. First, I would like to go through what is about studying economics in Corpus overall. I will talk about the fellows we have and their interests. Then we will talk what the overall possibilities that economics can provide you. And then we'll talk about three specific subfields of economics which interest specifically me, and I will demonstrate you how did they emerge from as a mixes of different disciplines and what insights can they bring to the economic fields. But first, economic Corpus. Of course, if you'll join Corpus as an undergraduate student, you're not joining just a body of amazing undergraduates and students courses who excelled during their school careers and got placed in Corpus. You also are joining the body of 4 economics fellows with a diverse range of interests. And those fellows are leaders in their corresponding subfields. And of course, you will be able to chat with them and grasp their knowledge and experience. And I believe that everybody can find something interesting in their research. I will go through each of them one by one. So of course, Andrew Harvey is one of our most senior economics fellows, and Andrew Harvey is one of the leading economists in time series analysis, meaning that he analyzes data sets which include a time dimension. He is the author of Forecasting Structural Time Series Models and Books, and also Kalman Filter. More recently, together with our other fellow, he works on forecasts of pandemics and specifically of COVID-19. This year, his research was named by Financial Times one of the most influential researchers in the world. Professor Paul Kautman is a co-author of Andrew Harvey in the series about pandemics and COVID-19, and he closely works with NHS and the Ministry of Health of Government of Kerala, and also cooperates on a lot of health-related issues with UK government. His interests are also in applied econometrics, as he's currently a professor in Judge Business School. Paul is Director of Studies in Management and Science in Corpus Christi. Then we have Charles Reid. He's a prodigy historian who is one of the youngest British Academy postdoctoral fellows in the history of United Kingdom. He specializes in the political economy and history of famines and financial crisis in Great Britain, Ireland, and British Empire. Interestingly, for instance, one of his research presented a couple of weeks ago about the financial crisis demonstrated that the financial crisis occurs when interest rates of 2 countries collide. There is no theoretical explanation of when it happens, so maybe one of you will find it at some point. And I'm not going to talk about myself too much, apart from me being game theorist. I think my interests will become apparent very soon, literally, so as we go through this presentation. Well, the presentation named as multiple phases of economics, and here I decided how to represent multiple phases, and I decided that 4-dimensional cube might be one of those interesting ways to do it. So this is for a tesseract of 4-dimensional cube, which has which has around 24 phases. Of course, economics has way more than that, but the thing is that a lot of new fields emerges on the edges of the economics, meaning that if each of the phases represents some field of econ, a lot of new research emerges exactly around its edge. So, and first of all, I would like to go through one of the classic definition of what economics is, and to give you my opinion on that. So, economics is a social science that studies how individuals, businesses, governments, societies make decisions about how to allocate limited resources to satisfy unlimited wants and needs. What I didn't understand when I was applying for my F1 undergrad is that economics is not all about finance and monetary policy and money, and not necessarily even related to those things. very often economics is actually like it provides a tool set to study individual behavior in certain situations. By individual, I mean it could be either a person or even a student applying to Cambridge, or a business. Of course, I guess this individual could be even a government. And so this statement opens a wide variety of possibilities. So, for instance, here I presented like something I called economics cloud of possibilities, and this just includes several of newly emerged economic subfields, including economics of information is one of the more famous one. It studies how people make decision under uncertainty. Economics development, several recent Nobel Prizes went to people who studied how economies of countries are developing. Behavioral economics is a subfield which challenged all the previous views about game theory and rational choice theory, and with the help of experiment demonstrated the irrationality behind almost all of the human choices. Of course, there is also economics of transport, Marxist economics, which is probably not very new, but anyway, economics of conflicts, experimental economics, about which you'll probably definitely hear much more during the second academic talk this day from Daria, and etc., etc. So today we will going to talk about three of them, starting with economics of conflicts. So, what is economics of conflicts and how did it emerge? So I prefer to think of economics of conflicts of something that emerged on the junction of economics and military science. So here is military studies, is a study of military processes, institutions, behavior along the study of warfare and the theory of an application of organized coercive force. Meaning that while typical vanilla economic studies as a redistribution of resources in a peaceful way, conflict economics waives this assumption and saying, okay, we have some limited resources and probably somebody we're going to fight about them. It's not necessarily about war as well, as you will see in a second. Economics of conflicts is applicable to sports, to conflicts in R&D races, etc., etc. We'll talk about it slightly more in detail. So, for instance, like this is a definition of conflict economics, is going to be something like it's a branch, or I would say rather a sub-branch of economics, puts the allocation of resources by means of violent fighting. It's such that, like for instance, conflict, and it puts those insights into economic models. So, it more generally to ask the question is how conflict influences our incentives, how it influences the development, poverty, inequality. We are talking on the macro side. As well as the growth and investment in a growing economy, if you're talking from economic growth perspective side. And of course, it talks a lot about the costs of conflicts. So such a direct cost of destruction, loss of production, human capital, and of course, the imperfections that the conflict might bring. And of course, my favorite question here would be how can one achieve a victory in a conflict despite having limited resources? And I believe that this branch of literature started exactly like that. So basically here, as an example, here. So as an example, I would like to walk you through one of the base games in economics of conflicts, which is called colonel Blotto game. So this game is why I'm talking game, because it's one of our tools provided by game theory. Probably I should give you one prerequisite to understand what I'm talking about. So if we are talking about games, game is a tool to analyze strategic situation. Strategic situation is a situation in which we have some players, and those players generally have conflicting interests. So in terms of conflict, it's very easy to see who might be our players. For instance, if we have two boxers fighting or two countries fighting, our players will be those individuals who have a conflicting interest over a prize. In a war, it might be a territory. In a boxing match, it might be a prize of victory. Each game will also specify actions. Actions meaning that it is a space of opportunities that they can choose to proceed, or let's say what as alternative choices that they can make during deciding how to fight in this conflict. And payoffs. given that given your choice and the choice of your opponent, it gives you it demonstrates how much you will get from the game. What will be your payoff? What you actually can potentially can win. Those games are solved using the Nash equilibrium, but I would offer you not to worry about this too much. This is something you'll definitely learn during your second year of undergrad, sometimes your research, depending on the program you choose. So in this particular case, we have a game in which two colonels are fighting in two battlefields. So in this is a very easy example. Colonel Blotto game is already generalized to have multiple battlefields up to n. And each of the colonels has n troops. So let's say we have n battlefields and n troops. And the objective is to distribute your troops around those battlefields such that you're winning the war. It is said that you're winning the battlefield if you distribute more troops to that battlefield than your opponent. A solution to this game, even this game was presented in around 1960s, 1970s. The solution to this game was fully characterized only in 2021, 2022. And before that, it was only solved for very special cases, saying that we have only like 100 resources in 3 battlefields, etc., etc. So it's not necessarily. So currently, the state of the game is very simple, but by applying to undergrad, who knows, maybe one of you will be actually who will be working on the problems like that and developing it into the model which has like endogenously defined values of battlefields, because in the original games every single battlefield costs the same amount of value to each of the general, meaning that if you have 3 battlefields, the one who wins 2 battlefields wins the game. So one of the modifications which hasn't been solved yet is like, what if one of the generals actually chooses the value of each battlefield, saying it's V1 and V2. For instance, it could be one of the colonels decides how to build military infrastructure in one of those battlefields. I will not go through the solution of this game. I decided to put it to keep it hidden, and for you to either search yourself or try to solve it in your spare time. Even it would be an extremely challenging task. But the insight that this game can bring to the real policymaking or even to military strategy is quite obvious. If you can model a realistic battlefield, whatever it is, battlefield in patent trace, where battlefields are different technologies or even as territories in a war, the games like that can give you insights on what would be the most optimal distribution of your troops in order to win the war and secure the victory. Let me clear this for now. Clear all drawings. Change the color. Okay, so the next thing I would like to talk about is the newly emerged economics of networks. So economics of networks is economics plus graph theory. And graph theory is a mathematical discipline, and it deals with study of graphs. And graphs are basically just it's a structure which consists of nodes and edges. Basically everything which can be represented with the help of a node and edge, and their bilateral relationship will be studied by graph theory. So how do they form like big network structures, like including n nodes, and what properties do they have? So so some of the economists, like for instance, Sanjeev Goyal of University of Cambridge, together with Matthew Elliott, realized that a lot of social structures can be actually represented by graphs, by those structures. And they decided that as a graph theory, like as a branch of applied and theoretical mathematics, can bring some insights into understanding social processes. So those in economics of networks is a field of economics that studies the impact of network structures on economic behavior and its outcomes. So it's examines the structures and phenomena as, for instance, as market competition, forming of friendship, distribution of technology, and even how people Google and how to connect the customer with a product on Amazon. As an example for this, I would like to demonstrate you one of the models which kickstarted the field. It's called the connections model, and it was introduced by Matthew Jackson from University of Stanford, who is probably the top one or maybe top two leading network scientists in economics. The idea is very simple. You have a lot of individuals. Let's say in this example, you have 9 of them, and each of them is looking for a friend. And when you connect him to some other individual, you provide him with direct value, which is represented here. So this value will be, if it is direct, it will be, for instance, W. However, by connecting to one of the individuals, you also getting the intrinsic value of all of the individuals that this individual is connected to. So basically, a friend of my friend is my friend too. However, as you're connected to those individuals indirectly, it will be multiplied by some delta from 0 to 1. And of course, the more far away it's a friend is from you, the less is a network effect that you will be extracting from this relationship. And of course, the maintaining relationship is quite costly, meaning that, well, you need to give some effort. You need to put some effort into maintaining the relationship. You need to call them. You need to be interested in what they're doing. So we economists prefer to model it as a sum cost function. But however, you pay only for the you only pay for the direct relationship between I and J. You don't pay for any other one. So here I demonstrated you like one of the solutions to this game. It says like, okay, if our delta, which is a coefficient which which modifies your intrinsic value of the friend, if it is relatively high comparing to our costs, it will be, you mostly choose either star network, this is called star network, or an empty network, meaning that nobody is going to be friends with anybody. I decided not to represent it here. And if delta is comparatively low to our C, you have a completely connected network. So because oh, sorry, it should be vice versa. This should be high delta, and this should be low delta. Sorry for that. So yeah, basically, if delta is high, you will get as much. If it's relatively much higher than C, it's the benefits of connecting to any additional friend will outweigh the costs, and you would like to connect with everyone around. So this should be high. This should be low. Okay, clear all my drawings. Okay, let's continue for now. Okay, economics of cybersecurity. This is my personal field of study, which started my academic career. And as you probably could guess, economics of cybersecurity is economics plus cybersecurity. And economics of cybersecurity is a study of how economic incentive and behavior influence the development, adoption, and effectiveness of cybersecurity measures, and how cyber threats impact the economy. So the problem here is that cybersecurity assets are generally non-productive assets, meaning that by spending money on cybersecurity, you're not actually increasing your production. That is one of the problems why cybersecurity was not generally adopted before 2016, 2017. Before the GDPR and before this madness with ransomware attacks. Imagine you need to invest millions of dollars in order to protect your data, but you're not getting some clearly defined benefits from it. So one of the tasks that economists undertaken, and it was actually started here in Cambridge, is saying, okay, but there is a clear economics incentive in investing in cybersecurity, and it's mostly can be represented as some kind of opportunity costs. By saying opportunity costs, what I mean, okay, if you don't invest in cybersecurity, yes, you might not lose money for cybersecurity, but there is also some value, like some expected values that you might lose if some ransomware attack or direct like DDoS attack will be successful. And as an example here, I would like to demonstrate you weakest link game. The weakest link game is a game about the individual users of a system. Imagine that you have several employees in a startup, and who can choose between secure behavior or risky behavior. What it says, okay. For instance, if you have five employees in a startup, and you ask every single one of them to pay and install additional like firewall or special or antivirus to your computer. Of course, you might have an incentive of not doing it because it involves some high investment, and you would like just to free ride in the system, and just like wait for everybody else to install it and consider it to be as secure as it gets. And payoffs in this case will be high payoffs if all players follow the secure behavior, and low players if even one of the players engage in risky behavior. So this game is models after weak link philosophy, meaning that the system is as secure as the weakest of this link. It was the first model which started by Oleh in 2004, which demonstrated that it is very important so that cybersecurity can be actually represented as a public good, meaning that everybody invests in it, but also everybody will get the benefits from using it. It was also demonstrated that this model was modeling human imperfections cybersecurity, and it changed the views of general cybersecurity communities that cybersec is only about computers and technology. And the insight from this model was that humans at least as important in all of this mess as IT systems. Okay, but let's mix further. So we talked today about the economics of conflicts and economics cybersecurity. Can we smash them together? Yes, of course we can. And then we will get an even more like a specialized subfield. It will be economics of espionage. Economics of espionage will be dealing on why companies or countries are stealing information from each other. So what you have here is a conflict around the potential technology, and companies can invest either to develop this technology, or they can engage in cybersecurity conflict in order to steal the technology. For instance, in the case of industrial cyber espionage, which is one of the biggest wealth transferring tools in the world. So the damage of the industrial espionage by the means of hacking is estimated to be around from $1 to $3 trillion annually. So this is a truly global problem and absolutely under-researched problem from economics perspective. And so it will be a bunch of interesting research questions that one might find. But okay, what will go even further? What if we will connect economics of conflicts with cybersecurity and networks, meaning that we'll mix all the subfields that we are talking about together? I put a question there because I put economics of conflict, cybersecurity, and networks. I decided that this name is just too long, and we just will consider several models here. So the first model is attack, defense, and contagion in networks. This is actually the model developed by Sergey Guyal, who was till recently a professor in economics department and one of the pioneers of a networks field. And this was a model which inspired me at some point to do network research. The model is very simple. You have two players, asymmetrics. Layer one is a designer of the network and protector of the network. So some people call it defender. And the second one is the attacker. So the defender chooses the structure of the network, while the attacker chooses the initial dot to attack, and then chooses the path to which this attack navigates. Meaning that this attack mimics some kind of a virus which goes through the network. Here you can see the like one of the possibilities. What if the defender chooses a completely connected network on 4 nodes and protects the node 1? If the attacker captures node 2, all the unprotected nodes will be captured automatically because they're not protected. And then as there is similar amounts of defensive resources in node 1 and attacking resources in node 2, the last node will be captured with probability 50-50. I should note here that ASSET is one of the early models, so early 2014. This field is extremely new. As the networks were valued according to something which is called cardinality, meaning that each network was valued according to the number of nodes it has. So the value of this will be some function of 4. I believe that in the original model it was 4 squared. So the value of this network before the attack was 16. And after the attack, if it's successful, it is 0, and if it is not successful and only the one node left, then it will be just 1. And of course, the way that the value of network was modeled, meaning that any network with the same number of nodes will have the same value. it should immediately follow that the best defensive strategy is to have a star network formation where you protect a central node. In this case, if you, for instance, if you have, in this example, have 4 defensive resources and attacker has four nodes to choose to attack, yeah, this high probability this node, this network will remain will remain with 8 nodes, meaning that it will have the value of 64. But of course, also this probability 1 divided by 2, it will be completely captured, so 50-50. But anyway, the star network demonstrated the highest possible defensive capabilities. So one of my work was, one of my papers is concerned about modifying this game. So of course, the main downside of this model is that it values the networks according to the cardinality of the network, meaning that just a number of nodes. What if we slightly modify this assumption? So if we modify this assumption, so this is like very similar model, but imagine that instead of valuing the network according to the number of nodes, you say, okay, each node has its own value, and the more connected the nodes, the higher the value. The easiest way to model it is, for instance, would be degree centrality, meaning that this central node will be valued according to the number of connections it has. So in this case, it will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So something like 10. And also, in the modified model, I assume that each connection is costly, meaning that you also have some value of maintaining the connection. It could be the value of high-speed broadband between data center of employee, or etc., etc. Yeah, by the way, I should mention that even the model is abstract. It was developed with cybersecurity in mind. Well, so is a network here was representing the set as a system of computers, or even mix of computers and employees connected together and producing some value. In this case, it was some function of number of nodes. So if you add the maintenance costs, and if you say that every node is valued according to the degree centrality, you will quickly realize that the optimal network depends on the cost of connection in comparison to the attack strengths. For instance, this is an example for on the optimal networks in 5 nodes. And you will see that if you have a very low connection cost, which like vastly outweighs the potential damage from an attack, you will choose something like this. It's a completely connected network. And then you will gradually increasing the cost of connection, and the ratio of cost of connection to the potential damage from an attack will not be playing into your favor, and you will be decreasing the density of networks, arriving to the star as well. So by doing this simple modification, you can already demonstrate this case here with the cardinality will be one of the partial cases of the model with a more sophisticated value function. What's interesting, you can also demonstrate that there exists an entire new family of nodes which will be leading to the highest possible payoffs if cost of connection is intermediate. So we call this maxi-core network, and it's designed as follows. So it has a completely connected core. It not necessarily should be 2 nodes, but if we have 9 nodes as an example, we'll have the core which consists of 2 nodes. Each node in the core is connected to any single other node in the network, and then the peripheral nodes are valued exactly to the expectation of an attack of the 2 top nodes. So for instance, if you have one attacking resource and one defensive resource, the expected loss to the defender will be 4, the expected gain to the attacker will be 4 as well. And this is exactly how you value those nodes. So this follows something which is called Drescher maximum principle, and I believe that you, if you're interested, you can request a reference. And I believe this is it from me. We can go to Q&A session.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Oleh. Really, really interesting. And we've already got a few questions that have come in, but I'm sure people will be typing their questions as we talk as well. So if you want, you can finish your screen share, and then people will be able to see you responding to questions. Great. So, first question, somebody's just asked, what type of economics is geopolitical economics?
Oh, geopolitical economics. I believe that geopolitical economics can be considered from several subfields simultaneously. So this is not my topic of research, but obviously geopolitics has an influence on macroeconomics, meaning so how the government operates and how it adjusts its policy to operate in the world. If you assume that the country is not in a vacuum, but also like there are other countries with conflicting interests surrounding it. Of course, the geopolitics will be studied from conflict perspective, as we even like observing right now when it leads to literally armed conflict. So I believe that there is geopolitics as a concept will be embedded in a lot of subfields of economics, and I don't think we can attribute. And I'm glad that we cannot attribute it to a single field. Moreover, a lot of economists will argue that geopolitics will be a thing of the past very soon. Overall, we tend to unification, creating the unions, etc. But well, I guess last year shows us like geopolitics will be around for a while.
Thank you. Next question is, do you have any suggestions for ways to learn more about the economics of networks, for example, books?
Oh, yes, of course. I think so. I think the great starting point would be literally going to Coursera and finding the course by Matthew or Jackson. It's publicly available, and it's an amazing course which can give you the basic knowledge about networks, and it also provides you links to all his books, etc. It's a real academic course which actually not undergrads, master students study during the Stanford Master Program. But please have in mind that is a prerequisite for economics of networks is at least basic knowledge of microeconomics, game theory, and a bit of econometrics.
Thank you. The next question is, how do governments and firms decide the optimal cost of connection?
Oh, government and firms. This is actually it's a topic which was not researched at all. So I guess if you will go through undergrads in Cambridge, you can write PhD about this. This is not an easy question to answer, but I see what you mean. So if the nodes will be symmetrically valued, and if they have some kind of big nodes of government, or the government will be represented by a set of governing nodes which have some synergetic or maybe non-synergetic influence on all other nodes, how to choose the optimal structure, vertical or horizontal. This is an interesting question which I believe was not researched at this moment, so why not?
An area for somebody else to research, maybe.
Yeah, I will leave it to somebody else, but it definitely is an interesting question to answer. The problem with any networks question, you need to possess quite an enormous knowledge in game theory and graph theory in order to model the system which will be solvable. But this is actually the challenge. This is why it's interesting.
Thank you. Another question is, just to confirm then, as the cost of saving increases, you simplify the topology of the savings. Is that correct? Somebody's asked.
I would ask to verify what did he or she mean by this question. So savings, it wasn't related to one of the models, or
I suppose so. So yeah, should we move on from that question maybe? And they might come back and clarify what they meant there. We've got how can network economics impact social media and election impact, for example, the 2016 US election?
So economic of networks started as a social, and it's called social networks, and of course political campaigns was one of the things that was heavily studied, because in the United States is a hot topic. So if you go through the course that I mentioned before, you'll probably see some models. But one of the ideas and one key takeaways is that you can use social media and so to take the data and to build a giant graph, but giant network of your elections pool, meaning the people who will vote for you. Then you can cluster them by the interest, meaning the features which are provided by social media, and then you can tailor campaigns to influence each of the parts of the networks, intervening in different way in your favor. Meaning that in a nutshell, you can build characterize a giant network and literally paint each of the electees So in red, for instance, if Republican, or blue if Democrat, and then trying to influence their position by influencing some key features. So yeah, if you want to read about this, you can go. This research is mostly done in Oxford by Oxford Internet Institute. I believe they studied a lot of political campaign using network science. I think it will be the starting point of your research.
Thank you. How is the history of economics incorporated into different modules at Cambridge? So a more sort of course-specific question.
So during the year one, you can choose paper 4 and 5, which will be dealing with history of Britain and political science, and the Charles Reed as a fellow that I mentioned today will be extremely helpful guide in order to navigate through economics history. One thing to mention is that while there will be some exposure to economics history, Cambridge undergrad course is extremely technical, and of course. It is as a counterpart to Oxford PPEs. We will be looking for people with more technical and mathematical backgrounds. So exposure to Cambridge is to history will be through 2 modules during the first year. You can read it on the website about Corpus, and then it will be several electives during the second and third years of your undergrad, which might include the history of British politics in a specific period, or history of Britain and European and Europe like together. But those courses are electives, meaning that you might opt out for something more technical. So yeah, well, generally, Cambridge undergrad will be much more on the technical side.
Thank you. That's helpful. How important do you think the field of complexity economics will be for future research into the behavior of agents within networks that are constantly changing?
So this is not my area of research, but I believe both Oxford and Cambridge have a significant body of researchers who are concerned with complexity theory, which started by Barabash's work in the Santa Fe Institute. So agent-based modeling and simulations incorporated together with machine learning has a big future in Cambridge, to the extent that Cambridge creates a new master program this year related to machine learning and simulations. So given that this master program will be created beginning from the next year, more or less, I believe by the end of your undergrads, this will be a big thing here in Cambridge.
Thank you. How can economics as a collective play a role in areas of other fields, such as dentistry? Is there a certain subsection of economics which plays a greater role in this field than others? So a bit of a specific question. But... It's
a very specific question, but the thing is, I don't know the answer for this question, but I believe that if we'll go to Google Scholar and put the hashtags like economics, dentistry, you will definitely get something. Is it a mainstream topic? Definitely not. Potentially dentistry will be could serve as a case example in one of these like microeconomic studies, if you consider dentistry as a firm which has taxes and etc., but it also dentistry provides some positive like public effects on the health. I guess it will be studied by health economics, microeconomics, something like that. But it will be very special cases. I don't believe somebody actually modeling dentistry specifically.
There are a lot of questions coming up on sort of what the specific modules you cover in the economics course. I think rather than asking all of those questions, I'm going to encourage students to look online, because you can see a list of all the modules that are covered in the economics course on the Cambridge website, and I can drop a link into the chat for everybody later. That's probably a better way.
What is the question? What I personally cover?
No, so sorry. I was just saying to the attendees, there are a lot of attendees are asking specific questions about, can you study this module and can you study this module? I think probably a better way of approaching that is to encourage everyone to go and look online at the modules available, and we'll stick on interesting questions about your insights into the economy. So next one of those, could artificial intelligence be a threat to the economy?
I'm strong believer that it's not going to happen, but I think there are 2 questions. So first, to economy and to the world. So I don't think we are going to be killed by artificial intelligence. And it's in the light of recent this ChatGPT arrival and there's jokes about Dream Trigger architect who should pull off the socket if the server goes rogue. So I don't believe we will we'll see something like that. But in terms of influence on economy, we'll definitely see our economy reshaped. We will see in the nearest future. My forecast would be like in a horizon of 3 to 5 years. That the text-based AIs will replace a lot of workforce, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's bad or damaging. It just means that we'll need to find a way to redistribute those workforce and talents into something more useful, something that is more human-like, let's say. So we are still much better in some areas, and probably will be better in a lot of areas than AI, and it will probably stay like this at least for next, let's say 10 years. I'm not saying it's until the end of our lives, but at least for the next 10 years we should. Yeah, so I'm not sure it's necessarily damaging. It's just challenges us to redistribute our workforce.
Thank you. Can you give a real life example of economics of networks / cybersecurity?
Yes, there was a real life example would be, imagine you have a set of employees connected to digital assets. For instance, it could be data or financial data on working with customer. You can think of a bank like Bank of America, JP Morgan. They have a set of employees. Each employee has different value, and you need somehow to distribute access to each of the employees. Meaning the question is, if you have an analytic who works with financial data from 1995 to 2010, should we provide him access to any other data sets? So, and there are two intuitions. The first one, of course, if we are never under attack, it's always beneficial to give more data and more digital assets access to all the service to an employee. However, if we are under attack and if we expect any of the employees to be hacked by social engineering attack or scam email, we would like to reduce the exposure of this employee to our valuable assets as much as possible. So this is one of the models which I've personally worked and seen with a particular application in management and access management.
Thank you. Next question. How do you counter actors like Cambridge Analytica using social media to mine data using network economy without taking down networks? So what's the balance there?
I think this should be heavily regulated. So obviously Cambridge Analytica and as far as I know, they received an unauthorized access to social media data, and of course this access should be private as it gets. If you're interested in that, you can put to the Google Scholars economics of privacy. It will be a lot of articles about what should be considered to be private, and what are the benefits and what are the negative aspects of that.
Yeah, and it's worth saying we'd really encourage students to go and do their own reading. So take the aspects of this talk that you're really interested in and go and read wider. That's a really great starting point for sort of engaging in interesting economic ideas. And Google Scholar, as you've mentioned, is a great way to start with that.
Yeah, before you start undergraduate, Google Scholar is the way to go. But as soon as you join Cambridge, you'll have access to Cambridge Library, and of course all the resources which are close to general public, which will give you which will give you access to the infinite number of papers for free, which is one of the benefits of being a scholar in UK institution.
Exactly. Lots and lots of resources available. Do government objectives influence the outcomes of the models?
Yes, of course. So sometimes governments are incorporated in all of these models, either as a player, but most often as a social planner, meaning that even we have some players with conflicting interests competing against each other, the rules of the games are very often set by governments. So yes, they have a direct relationship to all these models, and they very often incorporated as a third player who optimizes some kind of parameter in the game between two players.
Thank you. Do you think Bayesian analysis in game theory is an effective an effective method to model social networks?
Oh, yes, of course. So when I was mentioning that the games have 4 different parts, I mean, players, actions, and payoffs, the fourth part I said that we are not going to think about was information. And this information is exactly related to Bayesian economics, meaning the economics of uncertainty. Meaning that if, for instance, if we are talking in relationship to economics of networks, I guess a lot of people like this one, the defender might not know and will definitely not know where the attacker will start his attack, while the attacker might not be perfectly aware of the distribution of the defensive resources. So Bayesian economics and Bayesian probabilities are actually used to model this specific feature, uncertainty. Yep, so it's extremely useful and it's incorporated in a lot of models, but generally you start with perfect information model, incorporating uncertainties later on in the later stages.
Thank you. How do you think the new AI ChatGPT has affected the economy?
It's economized my time tremendously preparing this presentation. So I guess so we will partially answer this question by saying that it will affect the economy by challenging us into redistribution of resources. We are talking about minor content creators and people like even assistants and etc. So some share of workforce will definitely lose their work and then they will need to find place somewhere else. So I believe this challenge should be mainly addressed by educational sector, and we need to recognize which talents those people have and help them find a new job. This is basically it. I don't think we need to find ChatGPT and similar products, because it's just not going to happen. This is just too useful to be banned.
How do we tackle economic inequity in areas such as economic conflicts? Because surely countries with more wealth will be able to maximize battles more than poorer countries.
Yeah, sure. So you are talking about asymmetry in colonial Blotto games, and even the game. If you paid close attention to the picture, one of the colonels has like 4 divisions of soldiers, while the other one has 5. So it's in colonial Blotto game is actually very easy to incorporate by endowing one of the colonels with higher amount of resources or soldiers or military assets, etc. But the game will still have a solution. It just means that one of the players will have way lower chances to win the game.
Thank you. Would network economics be used to model and explore information flow and diffusion throughout the internet? Could that be minimized? How would that be modeled?
I don't think it is. So this is definitely studied by network science as it is, and probably in computer science and sociology, and it not necessarily requires economics to study it. Networks, the flow studies, information flow studies, are actually evolved from physics, who studied liquid flows through the sponge and etc. So if the question is whether it's going to be used to study, well, probably yes. But you can also find a lot of examples where it was studied from sociology and pure network science perspective and computer science. If you'll write something like, again, Google Scholar, like network flows or analysis of information flows in network, I'm sure you'll find something.
Thank you. Interesting question here. From an economic perspective, how long will the Russian war against Ukraine last?
I don't think any economics, like theoretical models, will predict it correctly, because we have, as we talked before, Bayesian economics has in place, and there are a lot of uncertainty. So it will be some distribution from 1 year to 10 with different probabilities on each of the outcomes. So we can only guess.
Thank you.
We can do educated guess, but it will be still a guess.
Again, there's some questions that are kind of going more far-reaching into your sort of your insights into economics. But will there be a digital currency, do you think, in the future, and how will this affect the economy?
So I'm not an expert in digital currencies, but what I think is at this very moment, blockchain technology is not found its pinnacle of its implementation. So I'm a strong opposer of digital currency personally, meaning that I see a lot of negative aspects with some marginal benefits to the current financial systems and SWIFT. And mostly, of course, I'm concerned with absolutely unreasonable burn of energy through like more mining of digital currencies and etc. So I would give a careful answer. I would say that in the current format that we have for Bitcoin and Ethereum, I don't believe it will be a global currency. This particular format, we might come up with something less damaging for the environment and for the energy sector, and then it might be used in like as a good alternative. But also, of course, the governments will will want to have some control over it. And as far as geopolitics is still a thing, the government will have the final word in it. Maybe it's not going to be the case in the future.
Thank you. Do governments tend to focus on more on one model than any others, and if so, which one?
So the government do not focus on models at all. They focus on the insights that models provide. That's why they hire economic advisors, who are actually, so one of the functions is to go through those models and find which one of those actually can help to tackle a particular situation. So, for instance, I believe that the United States is actively using economic growth models, which describe which production factors lead to the highest possible growth, and they are also countering ecological economics models. So I don't think there is any like one particular model in mind, apart from demand to supply model, of course, which is like implemented literally everywhere. But it will be a set of tools, so models as tools, each are available to the economics advisors of a particular government. So that's why economists are useful. Is there's like one ultimate model which can solve you all your problems? This undergrad would not exist.
Thank you. Could there be a war between countries that is fought through software or computers in the future?
Oh, what do you mean in the future? It's like happened already several times. So cyber warfare and cyber cold war actually happening every single moment. There is a live map in the internet of cyber attacks happening every year, like every second, actually, not every year. And it's the cyber warfare might not be considered a conventional warfare, but it's something which happens on a daily basis. And a particular damaging one is the warfare in intellectual sphere, where like companies or even countries are trying to steal intellectual properties of each other. So some in the form of a cold war, even between like Asian countries, Russia and United States, the cyber warfare already exists. So it just is a question is whether you will be willing to read about it. And also you can see that examples like that from Estonia, when the entire system of governmental structures like trains, for instance, or even like stock market in Estonia was like absolutely collapsed after a cyber attack. So yeah, in some way or another, cyber warfare does exist.
The next question is, what do you think about the situation with the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank?
Oh, I didn't have a grasp on it because the students who are already here were listening to my supervisions last week, so I didn't get a chance to read about this in detail.
Yeah, that's fair enough. What's your stance on central bank digital currencies? Could they lead to a more authoritarian economic system?
I believe we covered like it mostly about the digital currency. I don't think that current digital currencies are will be by any means adopted by governments in the current format. So I don't think it's relevant currently.
Yeah, that's fair enough. And then, yeah, I think we'll make this the last question because we're just coming up to past, then people can have sort of a minute's rest break. And also, we've been asking you questions for a long time, Oleh, so you've been doing really well with a lot of questions. So why do you think it took so long for cybersecurity to become commonly adopted, given the large opportunity cost of identity theft, etc.?
I think that while the opportunity cost was high, the people started to see real damage in 2016-17 with ransomware attack WannaCry. So it was the first moment in the history when the average company can actually see their neighbors or themselves being attacked, means data being encrypted, and actually like losing a lot of money. So basically, yes, it was a very long time before the first real blood on like large in the governmental scale was shed. And I believe that this was exactly the starting point where cybersecurity started to play a role. Before that, yeah, it was a couple of DDoS attacks. You might not even notice it. Yeah, somebody stolen data, and companies with those intellectual properties did know it and already invested in the data security measures. But for average company, it was not the same. Now that in 2016 and 17, every company relies on data. According to Eurostat report, we have 90% of companies, like or close to it, using some form of IT infrastructure and reliant on data. And since data is the main input in the generation of value, well, in this case, you can lose it. If you lose it, you're losing a lot of money, and you see it's happening around you. So, well, I think this was the main trigger into which actually made cybersecurity, put the cybersecurity and cybersecurity economics on the map.
Thank you so much, Oleh. Yeah, as I said, you've answered lots and lots of questions, so thank you for answering
probably
so
needed to do a presentation which is longer, but yes. Anyway.
No, it's great to have so long for questions. And as it is, we haven't even come near to answering all the questions. There were so many questions. It shows people were really wanting to gain on your knowledge from your expertise and really engage in your talk. So thank you.